We are live.
We are
Good evening and
live.
welcome to the latest episode of Love Engineering Live, where I'm talking to Danielle. And we're going to be talking about all sorts of things, masculine and feminine energies. So I'm going to start off by letting Danielle share a little bit about who she is, where she's come from, and what she does. Over to you, Danielle.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you for having me. I am a personal peace coach. I am a personal peace speaker. I started my speaking career about the time the pandemic hit. So I've had a few like campground type speaking engagements, and this all started about 3 years ago, this part of my journey. Up until that time, I spent my adult career as a horseshoer. So 36 years I did that. I am very involved in horses and have learned a lot through horse whispering in particular, and am thinking of changing my title to a people whisperer as opposed to a personal peace coach, just because so much of what I do is based on what I've learned there.
Yes, horses are incredible creatures. And it's
They are.
they read our energy better than we people do.
They absolutely are very clear mirrors for us and are incapable of deception. So whether you want to believe what they have to tell you about yourself or not, you might as well.
Absolutely. So, masculine and feminine energies. Beautiful things. When they are healthy and grounded and centered. When they're not, it's a very, very different story. So, knowing you as you are, being a very feminine centered woman, and also a feminist, I believe.
Correct. I definitely have a minor in women's studies from the University of Kentucky when I went to school to get out of horses, which obviously did not work. I was involved in here in the States in the Equal Rights Amendment, and I was president of the university chapter of the National Organization for Women. So I'm quite well versed in the feminist movement and the history of women in America and in Europe to some extent. So that was the beginning of that. And then, I stepped into a very masculine career. And there were very specific reasons that I did that, because I didn't want to dress in professional women's clothing. I am sort of the naked-faced, flat-shod person, right? I wanted to wear my jeans and my comfortable clothing to work, and I enjoyed physical labor. I was always a bit of a tomboy. So to say that I'm a feminine-centered woman, that would be a new development.
Interesting. So, from your take, what is the difference between feminine energy and being a feminist?
I think that culturally, feminine attributes and masculine attributes have been assigned. And so we culturally have accepted those, right? So I was a tomboy. So I wasn't in feminine energy as a young person. And as I learned about the history of women and the oppression that had happened over time, my particular adaptation to that was to step into the masculine framework of power that is prevalent. And that was sort of what the feminist movement was doing. We're stepping in where we needed to, where laws were being made and interpreted and enforced. We needed representation there. We needed representation in the healthcare system, and we needed representation in many of those power structures within the patriarchal system. So that's what the feminist movement was taking our feminine energy into that masculine power framework and saying, we can do this. And we should be allowed to do this. We should be allowed to participate in our own society, in our own culture. So that wasn't necessarily what's the word I'm looking for? Up leveling of feminine energy. It was an up leveling of feminine within the masculine power framework. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's almost a little bit like bringing balance, because when we look at the yin and yang symbol from over in Asia, you have the two black and white halves of the circle, but also with the white dot in the black and the black dot in the white, because that feminine within a masculine person brings balance, and
right.
vice
So
versa.
I
So if
think
we've
that's
got,
what happened. We were the little dot over here, right?
yeah,
So what still has to happen, in my opinion, is that the power has to shift to actually value feminine energy and what we consider those to be. If you accept that male energy, male thinking is very linear and
yeah,
goal oriented, we absolutely need that. And if feminine thinking energy is more collaborative and more a networking type, it's not as much goal oriented as it is process oriented, we need that too. And we need that to be valued just as highly. And that, I think, is still happening. That's still in process. That bigger balance of the yin yang symbol is in process, in my opinion. That's how I view it. I think within each of us individually, we all have that balance.
yes,
And we have our
that
own unique balance. And
we
that
do.
began to be honored a little bit within the feminist movement, where men were able to stay home and they weren't success objects and we weren't sex objects. That was some of the balancing, that the freedoms that this movement brought for individuals and for culture. But there's still a lot of work.
Yeah, even as individuals with both the masculine and feminine energies within, if for myself as predominantly masculine male, I shut out, if you like, or do not honor or respect that feminine energy within me, that's a very unhealthy place to be. And it's
It
also a very unhealthy place to approach a relationship from.
it is. And I had the same struggle. Even though I'm female, I had the same struggle of beginning to honor that softer side and that feminine energy within me. Like, it was a journey for me because it's not culturally valued. It's very difficult to value it in yourself. There were some interesting things that happened within my marriage. I am married. I have been married for 27 years next week. So when we were first married, he had full custody of his two children, and we had two more. And he was actually much better with the infants than I was. He was much better with soothing and singing. I don't have a singing voice, and he was perfectly willing to sing our children to sleep. And it was an interesting balance because he's very much a male energy kind of man as well. Masculine energy is predominant in him. He is a blue collar worker, and we're both horse people, which brings a necessary balance to be able to work with the horses in an effective way, because you can't approach them like Okay, so eventually we're going to talk about this anyway. With a wounded masculine energy and get anywhere, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So if the divine masculine energy or the healthy masculine energy is one that leads, gives direction, um, and helps us to stay on path to reach goals and accomplish things, then a wounded masculine energy wants to control everything, right? And
Yeah.
they, if you try to control an animal that is 5 times your weight and that thinks very differently, you might make it sometimes, but you're going to be flipping exhausted.
It's going to be a
So
very challenging situation.
So the same kind of thing is going to happen in relationship, as you point out. If you come from a wounded masculine where you're trying to control things and you're trying to shut down that feminine part of yourself or your mate or the masculine part of your mate because you need to be the one that's in control, it doesn't work really well. It doesn't make for a harmonious relationship. But if you allow each other to have both, then you're going to get a much more harmonious outcome.
Absolutely.
Not to say that I've had 27 years of harmony. I'm not saying that, but I am still married. So that's something.
I'd be surprised if there were any people on the planet that have been married for 27 years and never had any kind of disconnect whatsoever.
Yes, I don't
It's
think that
part of the
that is
course.
realistic.
No,
Not at all.
I think Disney kind of lead 1 or 2 people up the garden path with that happily ever after thing.
Yeah, and the whole romantic notion of love is a bit unrealistic, yeah?
Yeah, it takes bloody work.
It absolutely does.
So what happens from your perspective or your experience when the masculine side is suppressed? What was the unhealthy feminine look like?
You're not going to accomplish a whole lot, right? You're going to be wondering and letting the emotions rule you as opposed to you being able to experience emotions. If you let them actually lead, that doesn't work so very well. Because yeah, you can go from one extreme to the other. I went from totally logic to totally emotional to find the balance in between where I get to experience both. And I for a long time struggled with, okay, so am I supposed to be other centered? Because that doesn't work. Am I supposed to be self-centered? That doesn't work well either. So to me, I got to the point where I had to be God-centered. And I'm sorry if people don't like that word. I didn't like it for a long time because I definitely have some issues with how God's word has been twisted and used in religion. So whatever word you would like to put in there, spirit-centered, where I could actually take care of myself, be in self-care without being in self-centeredness, and be available to support my family and my loved ones without making them in charge of me or before me. I think that's part of the wounded feminine, is taking care of everybody else first and expecting that they'll figure out how to take care of you. Maybe that's codependence. I don't know. But it may be that codependence is sort of the wounded energies in relation.
Yeah. I think where codependence comes into play when you've got 2 different types of wounded coming together to do the best they can without actually changing anything because, well, all the problems are out there. They couldn't possibly be within.
Yes, yes.
And the other thing that comes up with, which I find, is people pleasing.
Right. So that definitely is a wounded feminine energy where they mean more than your own judgment or discernment of yourself. When you learn
Yeah.
to trust your own intuition, then that becomes a healthier place to be with your feminine energy than just putting that down and trusting what outside things are saying for you, or outside people, or yeah.
Yes. It's when people start saying, yes, I'd love to do that, when really it's not on your life, but I want you to be happy, so I'm going to say yes anyway.
And then
And
your yes means nothing because people don't know whether you
absolutely.
want to do it or not. Yes.
Yes. A good friend of mine once says, what's the value of your yes if you can't say no?
Yeah, I have a friend that's a coach that does a big session on that as well. If you're not able to say no, then there is no value to your yes.
Very much so. And that actually brings me on to a comment I saw in someone else's group this week. It was a lady says, what was it? It was instead of saying no to your man, why not say, I just don't, I'm not feeling it at this moment. And one lady in the comments says, well, surely if it's a no, it's a no. No means no, right? And which for me, that is a very valid point. If the man can't handle his woman saying no, he's in a bit of an unhealthy place.
Yep, and I also think there is that no doesn't mean no forever.
Yeah.
Right? So that's valid too. But I don't think I would go quite that soft with it. No means no, and it doesn't necessarily mean no forever, especially if you're in a relationship.
Yeah.
It means no, not at this moment. It doesn't mean it's not possible down the road, but we have to value, as I say, our own intuition, our own discernment, our own physical needs as well.
Yes, very much so. As one thing that's come up in conversation with a few clients where we talk about boundaries and things and vulnerabilities, and what I say to some of them is that when you look at a woman, if she's feeling unsafe, she's not going to share her body with you. And flip that on the other side, if a man feels emotionally unsafe, he's not going to share his feelings, especially if he's been criticized and judged just for having a feeling in the past.
Yeah, and who's doing the judging and the criticizing for expressing emotions? Like I said, I feel like that's part of the collective. Like
Yeah.
we as patriarchal societies have devalued that. We have said that's not important and that it's not connected. How could it not be connected to being human and be
Yeah.
an important part of that? So there is those, right? So either male or female can feel very vulnerable in that. And I think through no fault of the individual relationship, just because we're taking on the cultural norm of that's just
Yeah.
not important. So those are the things that we need to work through. And we need
Yeah.
to start to value those more touchy-feely things, as well as you need to have the logical, you need to have a balance. And I guess
Absolutely.
balance may not be a spiritual principle, but it sure should be.
Well, for my take on spirituality, balance is very it's a big part of it.
It absolutely is, to understand that it's all connected, and we talk about it as if it's compartmentalized, but
Yeah.
it's not, and it can't be. In my experience of emotions, if you shut down one emotion, you shut them all down,
Yeah. It's
right?
like
So
when
if I don't ever want to feel fear, if I don't ever want to feel grief or anger, so as a female, that's not an acceptable emotion to feel anger. As a male, it's not an acceptable emotion to feel grief. What? Aren't we all humans? Don't we all have a full range of emotions? And we just need to learn to express that in ways that doesn't harm anyone. So there's a difference between anger and rage, right? But if you have suppressed emotions for any length of time, they don't die, they gain steam.
oh
So
yes.
it has to start at a very young age, I believe, that we start
Yeah, very
valuing
much so.
all of these varying energies within the human experience.
Yeah, so I suppressed emotions for years, and then it was like there was this big part of me that I thought was the reason I lost love and lost friends and nobody liked me. So I'd kind of bury it and try and keep it to one side. But then as I got older, it's like trying to keep the Incredible Hulk inside. It's just
Right.
like it doesn't
That's
work.
not working.
And same in the movies, what the Hulk needed was love.
Mhm.
And that's what I needed, but I needed it from me.
Yes. Yes. And if we get to that point where we understand that we are lovable no matter what we've gone through, no matter what we have or haven't done, that we're still lovable and that we can begin that process by loving and accepting ourselves, that would be such a huge step.
Very much so. As that one saying we keep seeing in social media and personal development all over the place. If you don't love you, how can anybody else? Unfortunately, it's true.
To some extent, that is true. And we also have mirrors and triggers and other people to help us find those
Yeah,
places that we need to love ourselves. So yeah, we don't have perfect relationships. We don't have perfection in any of this. We have the ability to love ourselves imperfectly, to
yeah.
be imperfect, to accept ourselves and extend grace. Then we can do that with other people because we have felt how healing that can be.
And a lot of the time, the things that when we look at ourselves, whether it's the inside or the outside, there's these parts that we don't like. They're often the bits that are a little bit different to the norm. And they're the things that other people really appreciate and admire and love us for.
Yes, normal or not being normal doesn't mean it's wrong,
No,
right? It means it's unique. It might mean it's extraordinary. It can mean wonderful things not to be normal.
absolutely. Got to stand out in this world, or so they
We
say.
do. We just do. We're unique and we have those things that are unique about us. And if we learn to love them, then yeah, they'll shine as opposed to trying to hide them and let them explode.
Yes, I think men struggle a lot with emotions, and part of that goes down to this old perspective that men don't feel anything, just man up and get on with it, and boys don't cry and all this kind of thing. And then we get older, we still have the emotions, we just don't know how to deal with them.
Yeah, and I like I said, I think it's the same thing with women being able to express anger. It's not appropriate in girls. It's not appropriate in young women. And, you know, whatever the emotion is that's not normal, not culturally accepted, that's the one that we need to love on.
Yeah.
We need to heal it, and we need to say, you know, it's just part of being human. I remember when I was in therapy at one point, and I said, I just don't see any point to the emotion of jealousy. I don't think that it's just a waste of time. And my therapist looks at me and says, you're going to improve on God's handiwork? And I'm like, oh. So I have a totally different take on jealousy now. And for me, when I experience jealousy, I'm like, oh, so that's something I want. It tells me that if I'm jealous of that in somebody else, I want it in my life. So I've given it a function, and I think all emotion has purpose and function, and it can be informative, but I do think that we don't honor that culturally.
Yeah. Yes. I don't really see any emotion as being good or bad. It's either something that's being triggered but coming from a place of fear, or
Mm-hmm.
something that's coming from a place of love.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all either to show us something we value or show us something that we might need to learn.
That's a great perspective.
So when I've worked with a client and recently, and she was talking about the kind of men she attracts and where it all comes back to how her father was. And I said, well, when you approach a man with the strategy that you have right now, are you coming from a place of love or are you coming from a place of fear? And she sat there and looked and says, I'm coming from a place of fear. I said, do you want a love life or do you want a fear life?
Very
She's like,
nice.
I want a love life. I said, well, what would happen if you approach your love life from the place of love? It's like, huh? I can do that? I don't need to be like an MI5 agent after the first introduction? No.
And it is a novel idea. Isn't that a little bit sad? That it's a novel idea that you can begin to be present in the present and not bring all the things from the past with you.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
that flow, I think, is a divine feminine energy as well, where you just let things flow and go. You don't have to hold on to them. There's not room for all of that. There's so much more ease and peace in being present without like, okay, I'm going to put all of my things on you. Now you look just like I think you should look. But I don't know who you are because I'm just looking at my reflections.
Yes, because I think for me, feminine energy is very much like the weather. It's very unpredictable. Sometimes it can be beautiful sunshine. Just like that, you've got a rainstorm and a hurricane and all sorts of things, and you didn't see it coming.
Well, somebody saw it coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we develop that discernment to see when there's going to be a shift in the energy, but there's so much globally shifting right now that to be able to flow through that and for the male energy to be able to help support that flow and help the possibilities be seen, I think would be a great advantage.
Yes. I think the next couple of years are going to be very, very interesting once all these shifts have shifted wherever they're going to shift to.
Yeah. And living the question is a difficult thing. I don't know whether that's a male or female energy, whether that's a divine energy. I just know that we have to be comfortable not knowing.
Yeah.
And not let it make us just fret constantly.
Yes. Worry is a little overrated, I think. It doesn't do anybody any
Yes,
favors, really.
it doesn't.
Yet we still do it.
Yes, and there's so many levels to being a human being. There's the male and the female. There's the emotion and the logic. There's the spiritual and the human walking that out. That it can seem really complex sometimes when it doesn't really need to be.
Yeah. And then we're in a truckload of rules, regulations, and values and beliefs that are just kind of made up a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But when
So deception's not either one of those things, although I think that wounded female energy tends to be more deceptive, tends to be more manipulative.
Yeah.
And so as we heal both the wounded masculine and the wounded feminine, and we begin to see that control's not necessary, that deception's not necessary, that we can live the question and we can
Yeah.
not know the answer and just be present to what is actually happening in the moment and see what's being uncovered.
Yeah.
And once it's uncovered, then we can change it. But if we're not aware of it, we can't change it.
There's so many things that are cyclic within this world.
Mm-hmm.
And emotions are just one of them. You go up and you go down, you go up and you go down, and you go up and you go down. And sometimes us men just want everything to be ooh. So we understand it.
Well, you understand that there's a time for spring and a time for
Absolutely.
planting and a time for fall and a time for harvesting.
Yep.
So those things are predictable in their
Yeah.
cycling, the season cycle, and all of those things cycle on a predictable sort of calendar. But yeah, the rest of it, we don't know so much. Like you said, the thunderstorms can come up with very little warning. But you know that it's not going to be a snowstorm in August in our hemisphere.
Yeah. In theory.
In theory. And if it happens, well, there you go.
Yep. You just have to deal with it same way you do in December.
Exactly.
Get your big coat on and get on with
And
life.
we like the summer days in December. That'll be fine, but not so much. Well, some people don't. I like warm weather.
Me too. Yes, unfortunately, England, 10 days a year maybe.
Yeah.
Although we probably have about a few more now than when I was younger. It's like we got a week. That was it.
And
Now we
that
get 10
seems to
days.
go in cycles too. And I
Yeah.
think even the global warming to a certain extent goes in cycles, and
Absolutely.
we've exacerbated it and made it worse. So who knows what's going to happen now?
I think we've accelerated it. But then you look back through history, and every warming, there was a cooling,
Mm-hmm.
then another warming, then another cooling. So, yeah, it's going to get warmer, and then it'll die off and get colder again. When that's going to happen, who knows?
Who knows? But it's a great ride.
It is indeed, as long as you enjoy the moment.
Right.
If you're fearful of the past or fearful of the future, you're not going to enjoy the present.
Yeah.
You're not even going to see it.
No, you can't experience it if your focus is elsewhere, for sure. And it's something that takes practice. We're not going to change all these things just overnight and just by intellectually understanding them. We have to actually walk them out and have experiences of being able to change how we react and actually respond and actually have successes.
Yeah.
And everybody needs help and encouragement and support in that. So I'm really glad that you're helping people with their relationships. Like if you started with fear, you might have a fear relationship. Yeah, that's important. And sometimes we just can't see it. And I don't know that it's even denial. It's just not being able to see.
Yeah.
Right.
I think a lot of the time we go through life with the blinkers on.
Mm-hmm. There's a
And so
tunnel vision. Yes.
very much so. Get up, go to work, get paid, pay
And
bills, get up, go to work.
someday we go like, is this all there is? No, there isn't more.
Like, what do I do with all this extra stuff now? I've still only got 24 hours in a day. It's certainly been an interesting conversation.
Yes, we've gone a few places other than maybe just masculine and feminine energies and the wounded energies. That was a new concept to me just in the last year or so. And I found it very helpful, because then the energies that I felt like were difficult for me to accept, I could understand were just in need of healing.
Yeah.
And that made it much better, much easier for me to deal with trying to balance those out, knowing that that's not what that healthy energy feels like or looks like or acts out.
So how did you come across masculine and feminine energies?
There were 2 or 3 things that I came across. One was Claire Zamet's program, which is called Feminine Power, the Essential Course for the Awakening Woman. So that was the one that gave me the concept of the male definition of power, and that next step sort of being balancing that power between the feminine and masculine attributes and strengths, and playing to one another's strengths, and being there to support one another in this going forward. So that was one of the first places. And then, I'd always had that within me, because I did have the personal experience of, okay, so it's okay to be a tomboy, but when I got to be a teenager, I was supposed to be a young woman. I'm like, what? I have no preparation for this. I don't even know what you're talking about. So I kind of did, but I had no preparation. It was okay to be a tomboy up to a point, and then I was supposed to just be done with it. And I was like, so that was my personal journey with it, was to try to balance that out. Is same with like, okay, so my dream was to be a horsewoman, and at some point I decided that wasn't going to work, and I needed to go to college and be realistic and be blah blah blah. So I went and got a degree in crops and soil sciences. So I graduated the outstanding senior in agronomy and became a horseshoer, because that's what I love. And for you to be successful at something, in my opinion, you really have to love it. You're not going to want to work that hard, and you're not going to do a great job if you don't love what you're doing. Is that a feminine energy? Because I don't think men are allowed to do that, so to the same extent that women are. Right? You have to do that logical thing. You have to do that caretaking thing. You have to be man up, be responsible, do the right, all those things. So I guess what I'm pointing to is that there is no not knowing it. In my life, there was no not knowing knowing it. And then there was this that sort of sent me on this journey to, oh, so that's a whole different concept of making the whole power structure balance between the male and female energies, or the masculine and feminine energies, or even just what we've attributed them to be, because maybe we don't really know.
Yes, everyone has a different perspective of them, really.
Yeah. So
Yes,
who's
not.
right?
Well, I think nobody's going to be right, really.
Yeah. And like in my genetics course, they said, that it's always a matter of the interaction of the genetics with the environment.
Yeah.
So that's always going to be something different. The genetics are going to be different, and the interaction is going to be different in different environments. So it's not a really easy quantifiable thing. I feel like the balance is almost easier. But then just in the last year, my mentor, Paula Hopwood, introduced me to the wounded energy and saying, this is what the divine energy looks like and feels like and interacts like, and this is how the wounding affects that. So where she got that from, I'm not entirely sure. I just took her word for it.
Yeah,
I didn't question her on her sources.
Yeah, so I see a lot of different sources where there's quite a few things that line up, and so maybe that's somewhere near accurate, and then occasionally you find one that's like way off, and you think, that doesn't seem the same as them.
Yeah, and I know that Claire Zamet's work is very academically sourced, right? She's done a lot of study, and she has a PhD in whatever she has a PhD in. So hers is very academically sourced, and I feel like Paula's is probably more spiritually sourced. So some combination of that is a good balance as well.
Yes, combination between the mind, the body, and the soul, really.
Yeah, it can't be separated.
We can try, but yeah, doesn't happen.
No, and we can discuss it that way, but we can't live it separate. It's all one.
Yes, because it's like after with my business coach, he says, "So what are you going to do after all this?" I said, "Well, I'm going to focus on my business, and I'm going to just do this, do. And he said, "How's that going to work for you?" I says, "Well, it's going to work like this," and very masculine approach. And after a couple of sessions, he says, "So how's that working for you?" I said, "Well, it's kind of not." He says, "You know why?" And I'm like, I feel it's a simple answer, even if I don't know the answer. It's like, well, how many heads have you got? One. How many hearts have you got? One. So whether you're in your business, with your kids, with your family, with your mates down the pub trying to heal yourself with a bottle of Jack Daniels, he says it's the same head and the same heart. So if this little bit over here is in the gutter, it's going to bring the rest down. I'm like, so you mean I've got to deal with that stuff?
Yeah, and then the missing question would have been, so how do you feel about doing all that? Right? You probably would have known that if he asked you from the beginning, okay, I'm going to do this, 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 and this, and I'm going to do this, this, and this, and this. And how do you feel about that you would have went, it feels like work.
He did ask me that, but the thing is, because I'd suppressed so many emotions for so many years, it's like, how do you feel? I don't know.
Oh.
Okay, I guess. Okay, how did it feel to hold your kids for the first time? Like, I have no idea. I can remember the event, just no connection with the feeling at all.
No emotional connection to that.
Because I would just shut everything off so much for so long. Just like, what? It's like this feelings were a completely different language for me. They didn't exist.
Yeah. Yep, and I think that that's a common experience. It's not necessarily a, like I say, a masculine experience. I think that we don't teach emotional well-being in school.
Nope. We
Where
don't have it here
where are
either.
you supposed to learn how to use your emotions, how to deal with your emotions in any kind of productive way?
Yeah. And the learning you get at home is going to be subject to the learning and training that your parents got from their parents, who got it from their parents, who got it from their parents.
So
Who
it's a
you,
bit archaic.
yeah. It's like in this country, it's not that many generations ago when we used to send kids up chimneys to clean all the soot out because it was a tight space and they're small, so why not?
Right?
And somebody designed a brush to do it.
Technology is great when it works.
Yeah.
Yeah. Saves a lot of that kind of labor.
Absolutely. Not mention sticking them down coal mines and all sorts of things.
Right.
But then back in those days, kids didn't matter. If you lost one, just pop out another one, which generally happens
See,
if
I
there's
don't
no
think that that was
contraception.
true for the women. I don't think that was true. It just wasn't valued.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a very interesting, both in horses and in people. I had an idea that environment meant more than genetics, I think. And I found out very viscerally that that's not necessarily true. That my having children helped me to understand you get what you get. They come with whatever personality they're going to have. You can influence it, but they come already sort of, this is who I am.
Yeah. You might be file the odd rough edge off here and there, but
And help them balance, and help them learn to deal with the extremes of their personality, or bring out their strengths and help them with that. And I'm sure that I feel absolutely privileged to be a part of my children's growth and to learn from them how to keep growing.
yeah, my kids have been amazing teachers for me.
Yeah.
So taught me so much about what's really important for a start. And then I remember the one day when my son was having a bit of a meltdown, and I wanted to take whatever it was that was causing him grief or pain and take it away and kind of fix him, being a man.
Well, yeah. Even being a mom, you want to fix
Yeah.
those things.
And to this day, I don't know what it was, but I was really almost pressurizing him to try and get him to open up. And he just looked at me and said, "Leave me alone." Like, ooh,
Right.
okay.
He knows what he needs and he's letting me know.
Yeah, so I can't. So from then onwards, it's been more like, okay, well, come and talk to me and tell me what's going on when you're ready. And generally, he does. And because that reminded me that actually, I don't like people pressurizing me to talk and open up. Give him the
Correct.
space he needs.
And sometimes, especially I think with women, we just need to air it, and we don't
Yeah,
need you to fix it. And that's difficult too. And I'm kind of still in that. Like, it's hard to watch people struggle and just let them be and believe in their ability to do it.
yeah,
And support them to do it without trying to fix it.
yeah. Just hold that space. If they want some help fixing it, then they'll ask.
And if they
Hopefully.
don't ask and you offer it, you're setting yourself up.
Yes, unconsensual coaching
Yes.
never goes down well.
No.
So it's been a fantastic talking to you.
I've enjoyed talking to you as well.
Excellent. I'm sure everyone's that's been watching has been getting something from it.
I certainly hope so.
Let's see if there's any questions or comments anywhere. Reactions, a couple of love hearts. And one comment from Habib Fias saying it's a good discussion. I can't see any other comments right now. So on that note, I will wish you an amazing day, evening, afternoon, whatever time it is over there. The joys of this international time zones. It's like, are you morning or afternoon? I just lose track of it all.
Right? Yes. It's very difficult. It's good they have the converters in there so we can figure it out.
Yeah, I tend to take the Aussie approach. Whatever time of day I'm on live. G'day.
There you
Morning,
go.
day, night, it works anyway.
Absolutely.
So for anyone who would like to reach out and talk to you, how can they get in touch with you?
The best way to reach me is on my Facebook profile, Danielle McMahon. It is public, and if you would like to message me, I will be glad to respond to the message.
Beautiful. So thank you for coming on and sharing your beautiful insights, and we'll look forward to speaking to you again sometime.
Thank you, Ellen. You have a wonderful evening.
I will. I should be off to bed very soon. See you later.
Bye.